You know what time it
Time to
is.
stand up and speak your mind. In this elitist jungle, keep the beats alive. Whether yoga or doja that keeps you high. Gotta stay up, cause on the street you die. Time to wake up and see the light. Stop counting sheep, seize your life. Free your eyes and see suns rise on the horizon. Where the street meets the sky. The master's ignorance feeds our master's greed.
What's up, guys? How's it going? How's everybody doing? Wanted to throw out another little bonus episode. I like these little bonus episodes. They're pretty fun. It's just sort of, I like to keep things going and fresh. You know, I've been recording these episodes as things come up and you know, and keeping up with wanting to do one every week. So I've been recording. See, I don't need to justify. I want to just go into justifying right away. Look at though, finding awareness and paying attention. No need to justify. I like these bonus episodes. Want to throw them in there. So kind of wanted to get into talking about vulnerability because I feel like that's what I really want out of this podcast. I want to be vulnerable, you know, and I didn't have any intention of this being directed for men in particular. I was really just wanting to share my experience with everybody. But a young man that I work with, I shared the podcast with him, and he talked about how he felt, you know, like this might help some young men and help men to be vulnerable. And also, I recently listened to a new podcast by a man who I follow and respect very highly, and he's a warrior. And his very first podcast that he put out was about vulnerability. And I thought, wow, you know, and I felt like, you know what, I feel like I'm on the right track here with this podcast. But he also talked about he's a shooter. You know, and he teaches tactical classes and things like that. And he says the first question that he asked the guys when they all get together in the group, and which the classes are mostly men. You know, there are some women, obviously, but I think it's mostly men that want to be in the warrior class. And he said the first thing he asked them to do is get vulnerable. You know, why are you here? And that throws them a little bit, you know. And so I wanted to talk about this topic, you know, and also coming up, I have invited my really good friend Mo to come and sit with me and be my first guest on the podcast. And she wants to talk about vulnerability. So I kind of wanted to set that up and set us up and get my mindset into this, but also wanted to talk to you guys about it because I want to dive in and I want to make sure that I know what vulnerability is, right? And so I went ahead and looked up the definitions. You know me, I like to get these definitions going. So I went ahead and looked up the definitions. I got them here on my cue cards so that we can go right into it. So I went ahead and I was going to type in vulnerability, and then the word vulnerable came up. And so funny thing is I wrote vulnerability down on the card, and then vulnerable, I had to scribble it and put the E there. Fun times. Anyway, just ridiculous. So, vulnerable, right? The definition of vulnerable is susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm, in need of special care, support, or protection because of age, disability, or risk of abuse or neglect. Interesting. And I thought on that before I went to the definition of vulnerability. And I thought, susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. Very interesting. Susceptible to attack. And so the definition of vulnerability is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. One more time. The quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Interesting, isn't it? The quality or state. I was thinking to myself, right? And justifying myself and justifying this podcast and all of that stuff. And, to be quite honest with you, just putting this podcast out here makes me vulnerable. Doesn't it? Right? If you guys are getting in those comments, that makes you vulnerable. Just getting myself out there, doing this podcast alone is vulnerable, makes me vulnerable to attack. Any one of you guys could get, if you're on YouTube and you're commenting, could get into those comments and attack me. Putting myself out there on Spotify publicly, putting my voice out there, putting my face out there. I'm being exposed to the possibility of attack or harm emotionally. Physically, perhaps. If someone doesn't like what I'm saying, that's vulnerability. Getting vulnerable, being vulnerable, and that's a choice that we make, right? In our personal relationships with others, right? Are we exposing ourselves, or are we putting up a wall and saying, no, I'm not going to let you see that. I'm not going to let you in, and we do that a lot with our personal relationships, don't we? We do that a lot, especially in these intimate relationships. If we have really good friendships, really close friendships, or we have romantic relationships, especially if we're trying to do a life partner thing with somebody, right? We put up these walls because there are things inside of us that we're afraid of, right? We don't want to be exposed, because if I expose myself, then I'm open to the possibility of being attacked, right? Susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. And then I thought about this. So, if I become vulnerable with somebody, that means I'm in need of special care and support and protection. Right? Not necessarily because of my age or my disability, but my risk of abuse or neglect. Right? In need of special care, support, or protection because I'm at risk of abuse or neglect emotionally. And perhaps physically. You sleep with somebody next to them, right? Think about that. We've heard the stories of the veterans coming home in their PTSD and their suffering, and they reach over and choke their woman out. Fucking, or who knows? The women could be doing that to their men coming back with PTSD. Who knows? These are the risks that we take, right? This is a risk that we take when we get into relationships with people and we open up our hearts and we open up our souls and our minds, We open up our lives to podcasts. It's a wild thing. It's necessary. It's necessary. I think we're lacking this in this world. We're lacking vulnerability, right? And if you think about it, think about what's going on in the world, right? I think about this a lot, right? I think about the folks that are anti-gun, right? They feel vulnerable. They're afraid. They feel vulnerable. They're afraid, and that's true. They're afraid and they're vulnerable. Because perhaps they're susceptible to physical harm, physical attack and harm. I'm susceptible to those things. And we all are. Right? Aren't we all? We all are. We're born into this world, and we're honestly, as soon as we're born, we're vulnerable. And throughout this entire life that we live, we're vulnerable, right? And our ego steps in and puts up a wall to protect us, you know? And then we're looking for protection, in need of special care, support, and protection because of risk of abuse or neglect, right? Or physical harm or attack. You know, that's the same thing that, you know, women feel that way about this abortion issue too. They feel vulnerable. They feel like they're susceptible to attack, physical harm or attack. You know, and the people that are pro-life, they feel like those children inside those women being born are susceptible to emotional harm and attack. They feel like those little unborn babies are vulnerable and they want to protect them. Right? They feel like their religion is under attack. Their belief in their pro-life is under attack because they want to save babies, right? I mean, these are vulnerabilities, right? And these are vulnerabilities, you know? And learning to find empathy for one another and compassion for one another is really difficult when you're vulnerable and your wall goes up and your ego goes up and you want to fight for what you believe in and you want to fight for what you think is right and you want to protect yourself. You know, and we go on the offensive, right? We get defensive and then we might go on the offensive in some way. You know, we get defensive about these things when we feel susceptible to attack. I know I do. That's when I become angry. When I'm vulnerable, when I get vulnerable and then people attack me or harm me, right? Then I put up my defenses and my ego pops up and I go into fight mode and I'm ready to fight and I'm ready to find your vulnerabilities and dig into you and then I start to, you know, be an asshole. I can do that. That's dangerous. Ineffective communication. It's unhealthy. You know, and I have to work on that every day. Every day I have to get into my own self and get into my state and get on my knees and ask God to know my heart and to help me and guide me, you know, to be peaceful and to be compassionate and to be vulnerable as well, but to find a balance between vulnerability and protecting myself. You know, these are difficult tasks in this world when our heart can be hurt. When my heart is hurt, when I get vulnerable and my heart is hurt, emotional attack, and I feel like I'm being attacked emotionally or harmed emotionally, man, I go into fight mode. You know, I go into fight mode. And it's challenging to want to protect myself without being angry or aggressive. You know, when I was a child, I figured out that being loud and yelling and I learned that yelling would get me the attention or get me the thing that I wanted. Right? And I didn't like being ignored. I didn't like being ignored or being neglected, and I felt like when I got loud, I got that attention. You know? And probably as I aged, I found out that I could attach anger to that, and that would get me attention. And if it didn't get me attention, I could hijack the conversation. I could hijack the situation, right? Which is another tactic, a manipulation. If I hijack by getting angry and getting loud, it'll stop you from whatever it is that you're doing, and I hijack the conversation. And I have to be careful about that because I still have a tendency to do that. I've learned that worked very well for me over the years. It's not healthy and it's not effective because in the end I don't get what I want, which is love and connection. What I want is love and connection. And if I hijack the conversation with anger and attack and go on the offensive and go on the attack, my defensiveness turns into anger, which turns into offense, and I go on the attack and I hijack the conversation, there's no more connection. So the thing that I wanted most, which was connection, bye. It's gone. It's gone. So being vulnerable. Are you being vulnerable? Vulnerability takes trust. Vulnerability takes trust. And it says here, one of the things I like about this is it says quality. Quality. There's that word quality. What was that thing that what was the other definition that I really liked, and it was something that I'm working on, is reminding myself that I'm worthy of respect. And what was respect? Deep admiration for someone or something based on their achievements and their qualities. Quality. Vulnerability is a quality. Right? It's a quality. It's a strength. A lot of people think that being vulnerable, and it even feels like it when you think about this definition, exposed to the possibility of attack, susceptible to physical or emotional attack. Now, if you put yourself out there and you're susceptible to attack, it seems like that would be contrary to strength. Wouldn't it? Seems like that would be contrary, because strength would mean that I'm not susceptible to attack in some way. How do we reconcile this? I'm going to have to, I'm not sure. And that's me being vulnerable again. I'm not sure. How do we reconcile that? How does vulnerability become a strength? I have to work that out. I have to work that out a little bit, right? How do we turn vulnerability into unfuckwithability? I'm unfuckwithable. I think we turn that into strength because if I understand my own weaknesses and I understand my vulnerabilities and I have the ability to be vulnerable and I'm not afraid to be vulnerable, then when the attack comes, I know how to handle it because I've taken the time to figure out what my weaknesses are, figured out what the chinks in my armor are, and I'm able to protect them, right? With the dodge move or with other moves, with other tools and other skills, right? So that's how it becomes a strength, right? Because we're able to learn from it and to grow and to build more strength and to build more character, right? Other qualities. Because it doesn't become a chink in the armor, right? Because I understand that I'm being vulnerable. I choose to be vulnerable. That's my choice. It's my choice. I choose to be vulnerable. So therefore, you can't hurt me because it's my choice. And I choose to face those things and put myself out there, and I choose to be vulnerable with you. Does it make me susceptible to attack? Yes. And I'm hoping and I'm trusting in you that you will give me the special care, the support, and the protection, and that you will not abuse or neglect that. That's trust. I put a lot of trust. I put a lot of trust in you guys, my audience. I put a lot of trust in the people out there, right? I'm putting trust in myself that when an attack comes, because someone's going to hear this podcast, someone's going to hear me that doesn't like me and may get in those comments on YouTube and say something about it. And I'm going to trust in myself that I'm going to have the tools necessary to look at that attack and not turn around and throw it back at you. You know, I've thought about that, honestly. I've thought about a couple of people in my lives that I've had some relationships with that might choose to attack me over this, and could actually, they know some things about me that they could choose to put out there into the world, right? And I have to be ready for that, right? And I have been working on being prepared for that, because I certainly don't want any of those people to come after me and then me to go start butting heads with them. That ain't gonna, that'll be my ego, right? That'll be my ego getting in the way. And then we'll start butting heads and getting into a fight, and then it turns into a huge ordeal. That's not effective, right? Again, we talk about not banging heads with folks and getting into it. So I have to be ready for those attacks, right? It's quite possible that might not happen. I feel like I'd be ready for random attacks from random people who I don't know, who just want to talk smack. That's a different kind of a thing. But some of these folks who I've had relationships with, over the years, who know personal things about me, some of the mistakes I've made, and want to bring up these mistakes and start airing dirty laundry, that could happen. Shit, I ain't perfect. And with the culture we have today, with a lot of this cancel culture, people are bringing up old shit and throwing it out there and wanting to cancel people, right? And a lot of people are vulnerable to those attacks. We're all vulnerable to those attacks. It's a scary place to be out here in this world where we're wanting to do these podcasts and sharing ourselves on social media. It's kind of a new frontier for us. It's a new frontier for vulnerability and for character building and new strength building, right? It's a new world. This is a new world for us, and it's an exciting place, right? And it's a dangerous place, and it's but man, imagine the possibilities for us all, right? To share these, to be able to share with each other, with folks that we may never come across. We were talking about this on my other podcast. We were interviewing someone, and we were talking about this community and how this other community that we have, how it brings people together. It brings people together that you may never have thought that you might, you would never have thought to have started a relationship with outside of that community. But that community brings these people together. And that's why I love that community, because it's fantastic. I talk about skateboarding a lot. Skateboarding is a community like that, right? Skateboarding is a big community like that, where these people that you may not have known and you may not have wanted to talk to, or somebody that you know, I'll go ahead and share, what, I'm going to get vulnerable with you, right? I'm going to go ahead and get vulnerable. You know what, let's get vulnerable. I'm going to get vulnerable with you. I'm going to share a story with you really quick, okay? Now, I've been really confused about a lot of this transgender stuff, right? And the whole idea of they, right? It's been confusing for me, and I'll be completely honest with you, I've struggled to adopt this, right? I've struggled to adopt this. It's been difficult for me. I have some pretty traditional ideas and some pretty traditional values, and I believe in a man and a woman, right? I'm not attacking transgenders at all. I'm not saying that. These are just my personal beliefs, right? I truly believe in freedom of choice, and if you want to transition and you want to do those things, I believe that you have the right to do that, because this is a free country, right? I believe that. I also don't believe in telling others too much of what they can or can't do or can't say. So it's a struggle for me to find a balance in this world, right? But I wanted to share with you my experience about they, right? gosh, this mic just doesn't feel quite right. Maybe that's the spot. I wanted to share with you guys because I had an experience, right? I had an experience and it hit me and it dawned on me. So going skateboarding on Friday nights, we go to this spot and we skate at the homie's house, and he's got some concrete in his front yard, the front yard jam. Friday night front yard jam. Shout out to my boy. It's a rad spot, dude, the homie. And so there's a transgender girl there. Now I don't know if I get this right, and Anna, right? And Anna's a trans girl, so she was a boy and is now a girl. I believe that's correct. And Anna was skateboarding, and I was sitting down with another girl who was hanging out there. And the girl sitting next to me looks over to me, and she goes, "God, they have great legs, don't they?" And I looked over at the other girl and I said, "Yes, they do, don't they?" And she's all, "Yes," and it just hit me. It dawned on me. And I said to her, "So that just hit me right now." I said, "So you use the word they if you don't know what the trans person wants to be called, right? Is that how that works?" And she said, "Yeah, that's it." And I said, "Oh, light bulb." I said, "Oh, so if you're unsure, then you can just go ahead and say they, and they works." Right? Now, obviously, I had met Anna before, so I know Anna's a she, right? I know, it's all confusing. Anna's a she, right? And this girl said to me, she goes, "So honestly, you can use their name if you want to use their name. So Anna, I know Anna. I always say, Anna has great legs, doesn't she? Or Anna has great legs, right? Yes. Okay. And she says, but if you don't know, then you can say they. And they works across the board." And I thought, no shit. Huh. It makes total sense to me. Common sense. It just didn't quite click until somebody used it for me. And I was like, and that was my own ignorance, right? My own ignorance and my own stubbornness, because I'm being stubborn about this idea. Like, don't tell me what to, that's a boy, and I'm not, that's ignorance, and that's some of my ego getting in my way, and again, I just thought that's how it worked. And then I shared that story at another skateboard spot. I shared that story with some other folks. Hey, this just hit me and I didn't know. And another guy said, "Yeah, isn't that interesting how that works?" He's all at the office. We have someone at the office who is non-binary, and it just works out better. Hey, where did they go? Well, they went with Jeff to go get coffee, and it's they. And I thought, well, that's really works out for everybody, right? It's safe, right? And the world is not a safe place, and all the time. And I talk a lot about, getting uncomfortable because the world isn't safe. But when it comes to, and again, I also believe in freedom of speech, and I also believe in everyone should thicken their skin a little bit and not be so offended. I believe in all of these things. Again, we talk about balance, right? And stuff. But, and I'm getting vulnerable here with you guys again, because I didn't know. I didn't know what was the proper way, and I was being stubborn about it. And for God's sakes, but when it clicked for me, it just clicked. They have great legs, don't they? They went to go get coffee with Jeff, didn't they? Yeah, man. Piece of cake. When it clicks like that for you, it makes total sense. Just makes sense. I may not agree with all of the stuff that's going on, but hey, it's not that hard for me to do. It's not that hard for me to do. It's a simple thing. And be compassionate towards the trans folks. Show a little compassion. Show a little empathy. Be vulnerable. Allow myself to be vulnerable and to say, hey, that stuff scares me, right? That stuff scares me. That stuff confuses me and it scares me. It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable, right? And for God's sakes, man, I'm all about getting uncomfortable, right? Well, there it is. The trans stuff makes me uncomfortable. So I have to deal with it, don't I? Because that's the world we live in when we want a free society, right? Whether I believe it to be right or wrong, that's not my choice, right? That's not my decision. That's the trans person's decision to make. It's their decision. I have my own decisions to make. Clean my house. We talked about that. Clean your house, right? How dare I try to rule a city when I can't even keep the peace in my own house? How dare I try to clean up the whole world when I can't even keep my own house clean in my head and in my heart? So I'm working on that. I'm working on that. We should all be working on that. That's, and if you're out there, I don't like to shame a lot of people, but if you're out there, I don't like shame. And I have a lot of shame in myself that I have to deal with. I have a lot of personal shame. And shame is really hard to deal with. So if I feel like saying, you should be ashamed of yourself, I don't take that lightly. But I think a lot of people out there trying to clean up everybody else's house before they're cleaning up their own, I think you guys should feel a little bit of shame about yourself. You guys should be a little ashamed of yourselves. It doesn't matter what side you're on. We're all on the same team here, man. First of all, Team America. I've said that to you before. Team USA. I'm on Team USA. I believe in the USA. Secondly, Team Human Being. We're all humans, man, on this spinning ball of chaos, doing the best we can with the tools we have. Can you do better? Yes. Don't let doing the best we can be your excuse to not do the best we can. Actually aim for doing the best that you can, right? I talked about that a little bit too. Oh, the best I can. Don't use that as an excuse, man. Do the best. Do the damn thing. Get in there. I work at that every day. No try. I work on it. If you hear me saying try, call me out on it, man, because that's an excuse. We talked about that a little bit too. Did we talk about the keys? I think we did. There is no try. There's hard work. There's work and practice. And discipline. And I've been caught myself earlier a little bit, I think, wanting to justify early on in this podcast, a little bit of awareness, catching myself, bringing those things up to the surface and paying attention a little bit. It takes practice, and the more you practice, the more you become aware. So those definitions one more time for you guys. Vulnerable, susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm, right? And I'm going to separate these two. So vulnerable, susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. Vulnerability, the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed either physically or emotionally. And then back to in need of special care, support, or protection because of age, disability, or risk of abuse or neglect, right? So if I'm in a state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked emotionally, then I'm going to need special care or attention because of risk of abuse or neglect. Emotionally, right? Emotionally vulnerable. Let's work on being emotionally vulnerable. Let's work on that. See if you can find some vulnerability, right? Work on being vulnerable. Find someone you can trust. That helps us to build trust. You know? Vulnerability. I love you guys. Peace. I'm out.
You know what time it
Time to
is.
stand up and speak your mind. In this elitist jungle, keep the beats alive. Whether yoga or doja that keeps you high. Gotta stay up, cause on the street you die. Time to wake up and see the light. Stop counting sheep, seize your life. Free your eyes and see suns rise on the horizon, where the street meets the sky.
The masses' ignorance feeds